name is Megan. I am doing my presentation on the lessons learned from teachers and educators around the world throughout the pandemic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay. So I'm going to be doing the second half of our time slot together, and I will be talking about hyperdots. So go ahead, Megan, start us off.
Okay, so once again, my name is Megan. I am in my final year at Mount St. Mary. I am student teaching in the spring, and after the spring, I'll be going to grad school in DC. My presentation today is, once again, as stated before, it's about the lessons learned throughout the pandemic from different educators and teachers around the world. I did my presentation today with Dr. Smirnova and Dr. Taylor. This was a research project that occurred this past summer. And our research topic was about digital pedagogy and how technology has influenced education in different ways throughout the pandemic and now post-pandemic. As a future teacher, this topic was extremely important to me as my future career has been drastically changed because of COVID. And throughout this presentation, you'll see how teacher instruction and student engagement has changed throughout the past, we're going on 2 years now, and what the future looks like in terms of using different technologies in face-to-face classrooms. This is a quote that Dr. Smirnova actually found. And it is from the New York Times, and this was back in July of 2021. Dr. Anne Ishiramu argued that many children learned plenty in the past year and a half about loss and grief, about racism and resistance, about cooking and family traditions at home. What if we were to focus on the learning found and then we rebuild our education systems from that learning? So this is a quote that really just embodies what I'll be talking about today. And since I stated before, this was a research project. So this was our poster that we had to make for our research from this past summer. Our research questions were: what were the most effective tools in teaching? What were the most effective tools in learning? What digital platforms were adopted by teachers? What digital tools help teachers keep students engaged in learning? And what technologies will work in face-to-face teaching during post-pandemic times? So those 5 questions were what we based our research on. So before we begin, I wanted to define a couple of terms that you'll see throughout the presentation. So pedagogy is the art and science of teaching. It's most commonly understood as the approach to teaching, and digital pedagogy is defined as the study and use of contemporary digital technologies in teaching and learning. Digital pedagogy has been incredibly important throughout the past 2 years as teachers and students had to move to remote and virtual learning. By researching and discovering new tools that will support their virtual teaching methods, teachers have been able to appeal and support their students through a computer screen as opposed to just being face-to-face. And the past 2 years have changed the idea of technology in the classroom and changed education as a whole in general. So for our research, we had to go through a bunch of different literature, and there were a few different key points that I found in various literatures that I read. So based upon roughly 30 journal articles, I identified 6 main points regarding digital pedagogy as technology and digital inequities. There were apparent disparities between various student populations around the world. So for example, Middle Eastern girls had no access to internet, rural and urban areas lacked digital resources. The level of technology available and the educational context influenced the pedagogical practices. There was reliance on other teachers and teacher discoveries. Many teachers lacked the training and knowledge of how to teach completely virtually effectively. There were not many effective plans in place for an easy shift to online learning, and many needed to find discoveries on their own time and budget. There were promising applications found for all grade levels, which I will get into as the presentation continues. But some of the most promising applications were Nearpod, Flipgrid, and Google Classroom, and those were used throughout pre-K all the way up to high school and college. These apps enhanced student engagement, fostered relationships between students, and created an easier online learning environment. There were also more enthusiastic and informed teachers. Educators are much more confident and aware of how technology enhances learning now. Pre-COVID, many teachers had a lack of confidence with using technology in the classroom. But now, since technology was basically forced into classrooms, a lot of teachers now are much more enthusiastic about using technology and having technology in their classrooms post-pandemic. It's also a known fact now that there will be an abundance of technology used in post-pandemic classrooms. Teachers believe technology will be at the forefront for education in the future. And the change in the field of education is drastic from the pandemic. Technology will take place of old practices such as pen and paper and handing out homework to bring home, things like that. A lot more things will be virtual now. We had 4 different methods of research. There was literature review from various texts around the world. A survey was distributed worldwide. Social media, we used social media to distribute the survey, and our interviews, we used Facebook, Twitter, Zoom, email, and then teacher interviews. We spoke with a few different teachers just to get more of their insight on how they felt about different practices. So to begin our survey questions, we began with demographics. So we had the age range, years teaching, and type of school. Some of the demographic information is pretty interesting, and it relates a lot to different answers that they have later on. So the years teaching relates a lot to their age range, and you'll see that those really correlate with how they felt about technology and how they were using technology in the classroom. So a lot of our questions and answers also came from elementary school grade levels. So the grade levels is on the left, student population, and then the teaching environment is also on this page as well. So it's important to note that most responses came from elementary school teachers, and this changes what applications you would use. So a lot of the applications that are talked about may not work as well for a high school student. So it really is interesting to hear back from some of the teachers to see what technologies worked in their classrooms, and then another teacher saying that that doesn't work at all. And it really is based upon grade level and student engagement. So this is a slide on the students that the teachers who filled out the survey had in their classrooms. They had student ethnicities and quality of student internet access, and then median household income. This actually was something that made me want to do the program that I'll be doing for my master's. I learned a lot about how the internet access was such an issue for many students and many different student populations throughout the pandemic. And the quality of internet access, it hindered a lot of students' ability to learn. So that was something that I started to become very passionate about. And finding ways to create a more equitable education. So a learning management system and modes of instruction was also a really important thing that we had to ask the teachers about. So some teachers, they were not online the entire 2 years that we've had COVID. Some were online, some were always in person, or they came in like some days and stayed home some days. But the learning management system is how they broadcasted their school. So how they did their lectures or how they posted their homework. So it really did, once again, differ grade level. A lot of the younger grades did Google Classroom and Google Meets. And then as you get older through the grades, a lot of those teachers did Zoom. So these are 2 survey questions that were about technology. So the top survey is feelings towards technology prior to the pandemic, and then feelings towards technology post-pandemic is the bottom survey. So as you can see, a lot of teachers felt that as COVID continued on and they were forced into online teaching, they became a lot more confident with their technology and more proficient with their technology. But a lot of teachers also struggled to have the resources that they needed to create an efficient digital classroom. A lot of teachers struggled with that since a lot of schools and districts didn't have the resources or the funds to create an effective classroom. So these are different applications that the teachers used pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So Adobe Spark creates graphics, Bitmoji enhances slides and enhances student engagement. Edpuzzle turns a video into a lesson and it tracks comprehension. Evernote is an app about notes and scheduling. Flipgrid records videos and creates a classroom to share your videos. Jamboard is a Google platform for brainstorming and collaboration. Nearpod is an interactive Google Slides, which was used a lot in elementary schools. Pear Deck is another interactive Google Slides. Seesaw is another interactive Google Slides, which is also used a lot in elementary. ThingLink is an interactive picture site. It's a little bit like Prezi. VoiceThread is an interactive presentation, also like Prezi. And then HyperDocs, which Lindsay, who was presenting after me, is doing her presentation on, and it's another interactive Google Slides. So these are the 4 major technologies and applications that teachers listed in the survey that they had throughout the pandemic to engage their students in learning. And these 4 applications were not listed on the survey. So Canva creates graphics and posters. Google Classroom presents and posts assignments. RazKids is for kindergarten through 5th grade, and it is a reading website with ebooks. And then Pebble Go is for kindergarten through 3rd grade, and it's used for exploration and research in animals, health, science, social studies, things like that. These websites are also very child-friendly and student engaging, which is why so many teachers who submitted responses to this survey and were interviewed mentioned these technologies as successful throughout the pandemic and promising to continue using in the upcoming school years. So this is a survey question about professional development. Professional development is ongoing learning opportunities for teachers. It creates effective professional development, enables teachers to develop the knowledge and skills they need to address various student learning challenges. So as you can see, a lot of teachers agree that it is important to have technology-based professional development from this past 2 years for COVID to have an effective classroom. But from the survey on the left, you can see that some teachers did not receive that professional development. So this is an interview that we did with Teresa Voschel. She is a second grade teacher from Newburgh, Michigan, and she discusses how professional development is so important and necessary on various digital technologies and platforms. But this teacher was thrown into the virtual teaching setting and was not given access to these resources or professional development unless she paid for them herself and participated in it personally.
Yeah, we in our district, we had been focusing so much. We are, I'm in a low income area, very high poverty. Actually, all students in our district qualify for free breakfast and free lunch. So we had done literally no professional development on technology. I mean, when we originally got our iPads several years before, there was a little bit, but not even very much. And honestly, my principal said to me, I'm throwing you in, sink or swim time. I'm sorry, but you're on your own. And I mean, there was a kindergarten virtual teacher, a first grade. So there was 5 of us who were sinking and swimming together. And it was crazy.
So from the survey and from the interviews, we had a few different notes that teachers wrote down about the most important aspects of remote teaching. So student engagement and student well-being were the 2 most important noted aspects of online teaching. And along with these 6, there was also assessments, family communication, and access to assignments. Those were the main things that teachers noted down that they felt were the most important in remote teaching. This is an interview with Abigail May. She is from Norfolk, Virginia, and she taught virtually for the majority of the pandemic. And she discusses the importance of social emotional learning in early childhood and how she did this virtually.
And in early childhood, relationships are so important, and social emotional well-being is so important. And I don't even try to teach academics until I've taught that, like, or done some work on those social emotional skills, because you cannot learn in school unless you can handle, can manage those. So that was very difficult to do virtually. Those things, and like teaching things like washing your hands, because there's a much bigger focus on that, and wearing a mask properly. Even though we weren't in the classroom, we still wanted to talk about that if we ever did go back in person, and we did. So that was one of the hardest things, was the student relationships and social emotional was difficult.
So in response to the research questions, Abigail May touched on effective tools in teaching and learning begins with creating relationships with one another. And she noted how incredibly difficult it was for her to do that over computer screens, but most importantly, to build trust, comfortability, and confidence between the student and teacher, and student to student was something that she really focused on. And she found different resources to do this virtually, since she recognized the importance of social emotional learning in early childhood. So the promising applications that many teachers will continue to use in the classroom when, now this year, a lot of students are back into the classrooms. So a lot of these applications will be used in the classroom this year and continuing on into the future. Seesaw, students can create content and virtually explain their concepts. So this emphasizes student engagement and creativity. Flipgrid allows students to create videos, interact with one another, and embellish tasks. So this emphasizes collaboration and relationships with one another. Nearpod has the ability to broadcast live lessons and create interactive lesson plans. Teachers can have a more focused and engaged class because of the live interactive activities embedded into their lesson plans. And then Google Classroom simplifies creating, distributing, and processing student assignments. Students, teachers, and parents can easily locate assignments and supplemental materials to support student learning. So the younger grades definitely use Seesaw, Nearpod, Flipgrid, Google Classroom. The older grades used Google Classroom a lot and IXL, which is the math application. On the next slide, you will be able to hear from a teacher about her success with the application Seesaw and why her and her students enjoyed that app so much.
Technology has definitely changed education for the better, especially this past year, and I am extremely excited to use some really key pieces of technology that I've used this past year, virtual teaching. In one of those resources in particular is Seesaw. I used that with my first graders, and it was really great to see them interact with the website. So they could either take photos of their work or post videos, explaining their thought process through a certain set of problems. And it was just really great to see how energetic and lively these kids were when interacting with the website and sharing their thoughts.
So this was a master's student. Her name is Carly Opar. She did her master's in curriculum and instruction at UVA, and she is now in person in a second grade classroom in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. She is an update with her. She is using Seesaw weekly. She loves Seesaw. Her students in her classroom love Seesaw, and she is actually on a military base. So she has a lot of students coming in and out of her classroom. And this technology has allowed those students who come in and are new to collaborate and engage with their peers. And it's also an easy technology for them to use. So she's been really enjoying using Seesaw, and she says that she will be continuing to use it as she continues her career. So obviously teaching has transformed in drastic ways. Technology is the new norm. In in-person classrooms from COVID, there will be achievement gaps just based upon lack of resources, access to technology, access to resources from COVID. Teachers will have a much higher expectation to continue to use technology in the classroom and use different technologies in the classroom from what they were using before. And the main takeaway is that technology use will be integrated into daily classroom learning. And the final conclusions from our research was that teachers have become more effective and adaptable because of the pandemic, and teachers have a newfound enthusiasm towards technology in the classroom. And while a lot of teachers found technology to be a little iffy in the classrooms, technology has proven to have a positive purpose for students and teachers in the classroom, and technology is the new norm. So we must continue to evaluate digital technologies and determine their value and effectiveness for a post-pandemic classroom, since technology will be used from now until whenever. But technology is the new norm, and a lot more research is coming in now about how technology influences the classroom. that was my presentation, and Lindsay is up now to present her research from the summer as well.
Thank you, Megan. That was great. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully, okay, there we go. So, okay. So this is my presentation about HyperDocs and how it can be used to engage students in active learning. This was also a research project that I did with Dr. Taylor and Dr. Shmanova, and also another student, Megan Shalvey. So I just wanted to add her there. Okay, so COVID brought a lot of changes in education. Schools were closing, students were now learning at home, and we had to take into consideration the environments. Not every student had their parent with them all the time while they were learning. Parents still had to go to work, still had to figure out how they were going to maintain their daily lives with their children at home. So there was a research article done in May 2020, and COVID brought about a holding pattern in education where students weren't learning as much as they should have, as much as the new material as they should have. Instead, teachers were reviewing what they should already know in order to move forward. So that kind of brought about students aren't where they should be. Sorry, I have a 3-year-old, so, you know. Okay, so what is HyperDocs? This research was brought about because I started to wonder, well, how are teachers going to teach and engage students when they have the ability to go to their refrigerator and get snacks? When they have video games, when they have the internet right in front of them, why would they want to pay attention to class, right? So we came across HyperDocs, and HyperDocs are a transformative digital lesson plan that the teacher creates and then gives to the students. So students are finding the answers themselves. It's called inquiry-based learning in education, and it switches the typical teacher-led instruction to student-centered. So it's interactive. You can personalize it based on your class and your students. It's engaging. So what is the difference between a multimedia set and HyperDocs? So over here, we have the multimedia set. It can be a document, it could be a slideshow, but it has all of the links in one spot. So here they're reading an article, watching a video, playing a game, there are links, right? Now on this side of the screen, we have the HyperDoc. So here, students are not only given links, but they are given a task to do. So they have to apply their learning and share it with each other. They collaborate together. So it's not only giving them the links, but giving them something to do with what they're learning. So our research, we had 4 guiding questions to our research. The first was, how do educators conceptualize HyperDocs? How are teachers going to use HyperDocs in different subjects? Hold on, baby. Why do teachers use HyperDocs? And how do HyperDocs work to engage students? So I'm going to go over these now. So the first one, how do educators conceptualize HyperDocs? So first I wanted to look at the creators of HyperDocs, which are 3 teachers, Lisa Highfill, Sarah Landis, and Kelly Hilton. They created HyperDocs. And I also had the opportunity to interview Sarah, so I will be touching on that a little bit later. So HyperDocs they are based off the 5E learning cycle. So the first one is engage. So let's pretend that we're in a lesson right now, or, you know, I'm the teacher and I come across this quote: "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." So that's a Native American proverb. I could base an entire lesson based off this quote. I could give this quote to students and ask them, okay, what does this make you feel? What comes to your mind when I say this quote? I'm engaging them so that by the time I bring in the content, they want to know about it. Sorry. Okay, so now the next E is explore. So students will be given, this is an example of a hyperdoc that I created. They can read an article, view a video. They're given different types of resources for your different learners in the classroom. And then they are given a task to do down here. So after they explore the resources and they're kind of learning on their own, they then have to explain what they're learning. Oh, I'm sorry. So you can break your students up into groups. This was just one example of what a teacher did. And then each group had to explain a specific global issue. And then students have to elaborate. So the elaborate part can be like, these students created a podcast. And then evaluate is the teacher grading their work or just giving some type of feedback to what the students did. Okay, so number 2, how are teachers using hyperdocs in different subjects? So hyperdocs are really flexible and you can create them based on just about anything. So this hyperdoc for a kindergarten classroom was based on the book, The Beautiful Oops. And they had a bunch of tasks that they had to do, small group time, they had reading time, they had to stop and sketch out. And if you see here in the blue, they had at home or in class. So hyperdocs can really be used whether you're in-person teaching, you're virtual teaching, or maybe you're doing a hybrid version of the two. This is for a first grade class. So I didn't put the whole hyperdoc here, but this one is about the US Constitution. So these can really be used for any grade level and for any theme. This one is based on Pokemon Go. That was pretty popular a while ago. So it's another way to engage students by creating these lessons that are about things that they care about and things that they think are fun and interesting. And you can base learning off of that. And this one is another one for math. So now let's go into, why do teachers use hyperdocs? So hyperdocs are engaging. They're student-centered and they empower both the students and the teachers. So teachers are empowered because they can use their creativity to create lessons that their students care about. And their students are empowered because they get to take responsibility of their own learning. And they can do them on their own task, on their own pace, I'm sorry. And hyperdocs are also very customizable. So how do hyperdocs work to engage students? So as I said, they can work on their own pace, and teachers can remix or edit the hyperdocs to give many opportunities for differentiation. So you can hit the different levels of the students in your classroom all in one lesson. And so we also did a survey, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So just a brief overview. The experience with HyperDocs, our participants, over half of them had no experience with it at all. And over half of them hadn't even heard about HyperDocs, which is interesting. And it made us look into literature about HyperDocs. And we found out that there really isn't much research done on HyperDocs yet. So the participants that did know about HyperDocs, when we asked them what HyperDocs required when you teach, they said making sure students can follow along easily and needing to be sure that I have differentiated and scaffolded the HyperDoc for the variety of learners in my classroom. And the respondents also stated that students become more independent learners, students are more engaged, and I'm able to have the majority of my students take a deeper dive into the material. And that's everything that we want in a classroom. We want students to care about what they're learning. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. All right, baby. So now let me go really quickly into the benefits of HyperDocs. So when I met with Sarah Landis, one of the creators, we talked about how social emotional learning can be built into HyperDocs. We can build in places for students to reflect on their learning. We can build in social awareness into our HyperDocs, and also the self-management. Okay, class, this is your work to do. And they can self-pace themselves as they go through these assignments. So we are also helping build students as a person also. They're very flexible and they support a variety of modalities. So as I said, if you're doing in-person learning, you can use a HyperDoc. Hold on. If you're doing things virtually, you can use a HyperDoc. So you can use them, and no matter what age the students are. I created a HyperDoc for an event that I put on for college students, and we used a HyperDoc. As I showed an example of a kindergarten classroom and what a HyperDoc might be used for them. And also it organizes all of the materials in one place for students. So you don't have to look for the link, they're all in one spot. Students can use creative critical thinking, and hyperdocs.co is a website, and the creators of HyperDocs created the website, and teachers can share the HyperDocs that they've created in one place. So on that website, I linked it here below, you will be able to find HyperDocs on different age ranges and different content. And then you can remix it based on what your needs are for your classroom. And this is a quote from Sarah Landis from our interview. And I asked her, for someone who doesn't have any experience of HyperDocs, what would you tell them is the most important feature? And she said, it's the connector between the teacher and the student. I created something for you, and you get to do something powerful with it. And I just thought that that quote was so powerful. It's like, as a teacher, that's what we want for our students to do. We want them to learn something, to remember it, and to take it with them and use it in different areas of their lives, to make connections to the things that they're learning in the classroom. And HyperDocs can help do that. So thank you. That was my presentation. Thank you.